What's going on, Warriors? It's Coach Jay. Welcome back to the Warrior Zone. It's showtime. We're going to dive in today. Why carbohydrates are important for you to start to take more of if your goal is to gain weight as a type 1 diabetic. If it's the first time on the channel, I'm a type 1 diabetic bodybuilder. And I played sports my whole life, guys. I played football, soccer, hockey, bodybuilding growing up. And now I'm a diabetic fitness coach. I help diabetics to transform their body and control their blood sugars. But even if you're not a diabetic, but you like supplement reviews, you'll find some content here for you also. You go ahead, smash the subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you guys don't miss out on any of these videos I drop. Think about when you were first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. When you're first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, your body itself was producing less and less insulin, and as a result, you were starting to drop weight. Now, a lot of times you have to understand insulin is being our body's weight-gaining hormone, and the number one thing for a type 1 diabetic that triggers that insulin release is carbohydrates or glucose. Now, when you first got diagnosed, your body was producing less and less insulin. Sure, we can say that a lot of that weight loss could have been due to the fact that you were in a DKA, so the blood sugar was staying consistently high. It was breaking down tissue in the body, potentially, hopefully you didn't get too far there. And then you start reversing yourself out. But the main point is that insulin is a huge driving factor to us being able to store glucose the right way, to also be able to put on weight over time as well. Let's say you take two people and they're eating the same amount of calories, for example, right? If they're eating the same amount of calories, but one person is eating a diet that's focused more on fat, and one person is eating a diet more focused on driving the carbohydrates up, I can almost guarantee the person on carbohydrates is gonna have a lot more weight, regardless of calories in, calories out. Another reason why that is because for every 1 gram of carbohydrate, your body is gonna hold about 3 to 4 grams of water. So right off the bat, you're actually holding more water just off eating more carbohydrate. Now, another thing to also note is when you're working out in your training, we have to understand 3 systems our body uses when we train. The first system that our body uses when we train is the ATP-CP system. This stands for adenosine triphosphate creatine phosphate system. Think about ATP as your body's energy molecule is basically like the director. And so without the director of a play, your body is not going to be able to function the right way. You need the director, and ATP is the director that's going to allow things to move. It's the energy your body's going to need to get the work done. The ATP-CP system, this doesn't last very long because your body's going to deplete this, you can say maybe under 5 seconds. When your body's depleted this ATP, it's going to look more towards what's called glycolysis. Glycolysis is just going to be more the breakdown of glucose to use as energy. So if you're using glucose as energy, and if the body's next point within this system that you're going to go through, the glycolytic system, which is also part of the anaerobic system, meaning without oxygen, your body's going to prefer to use glucose or already stored ATP, right? And so if you don't have that glucose on board, it's almost like grinding gears sometimes, and it might make it harder for you to really utilize glucose the best way possible to put on that muscle. What you're also doing by having carbohydrates is preserving lean muscle tissue. If you don't have as many carbohydrates on board, you could be tapping into more lean muscle tissue. It's not that you can't build muscle. It's just that you might not be maximizing the muscle you can build and the weight you are gaining. So you're not really maximizing the muscle you're building if you're not using glucose to help your body to preserve some of that lean muscle so the body can tap in and use glucose for energy and not really dive into using any protein or muscle tissue to do that as well in the long run, right? And if you can imagine, again, glucose can get stored as glycogen in your body's muscle cells. So when you're training, that can get released and then used as energy. Somebody that's depleted in that doesn't have as much, not only is not really filling out water-wise and gaining more weight from that perspective, but also might have a harder time as well utilizing that for energy. And so the body's gonna look towards fat and some muscle tissue to use that as well. And another thing as a side note to remember too when it comes to carbohydrates, it's important for you to focus on carbohydrates that feel good for your body. Some people, for example, might have celiac disease, so those carbs don't really feel well when you're ingesting them. So you gotta find your own patterns and what carbs work best for you. Maybe focus more on low glycemic carbs if you're focused on really stopping that heavy insulin spike that can happen with higher glycemic foods. The glycemic index just measures how fast your blood sugar spikes after eating particular foods. And so you go more low glycemic foods, then you can focus on really keeping that blood sugar a little bit more stable or more in range. Even if you're somebody that takes insulin injections, you don't have to necessarily worry about that spike as much. And so it could probably help to keep your blood sugars more stable. Fruits, vegetables, some people whole grains just don't work, but fruits and vegetables, root vegetables, you got sweet potatoes, wild rices, things like that are really great as well, things that you can try. This is another extremely important factor that you have to take into account when it comes to gaining weight. As a type 1 diabetic, we don't produce insulin, of course, or we produce less and less over time. Now, somebody who is not a diabetic, they could just eat protein and fats. And off of eating protein, their body can still release insulin in the body, which can help them to shuttle more of those amino acids from protein to their muscle cells to help them repair muscle more, right? To help them shuttle more nutrients, get the amino acids into the body's cells. Whereas a type 1 diabetic doesn't have that same advantage of being able to do that. And so by you just eating protein, you're not necessarily getting that insulin on board the same way that someone would if they were not a type 1 diabetic. And remember, insulin's importance of shuttling nutrients to the body's cells, also shuttling things like aminos are building blocks of protein to the body's cells as well, which could potentially give someone an advantage who does not have to worry about having carbohydrates in to release that insulin injection. Whereas you, to release that insulin injection, typically speaking, need carbohydrates on board with the protein. So you trigger the insulin injection. The insulin injection is going to shuttle the glucose into the cells, store it as glycogen for your next workout, preserving muscle. But then it's also going to help to shuttle the aminos into the body's cells, the building blocks of protein, to help you to repair damaged muscle as well. Over time, someone that keeps knocking off muscle tissue, they don't have the glycogen backup, it just becomes a vicious cycle of you're knocking down your potential to build muscle and also gain weight as well. And so taking into account a lot of these factors can really help you to crush things and take it to the next level when it comes to weight gain specifically, and using carbohydrates to help you do that.